Hello, my name's Kim and welcome to the start of what is going to be a month-long project where I am in my medieval era. Just a little context, my name's Kim. I did a medieval studies master's degree. I enjoy medieval history. It was kind of a random decision to do the masters. It was a pandemic masters, and I am just a little bit of a person who's interested in medieval stuff, and so I kind of have a little bit of a fixation with picking up medieval books, and so it just so happened that there's quite a few releases this year that kind of fit that, and I thought what better way to celebrate my medieval history fanatic side than to read some of those books. The reason I'm posting it in July is because there is one book that is coming out, which is The Starving Saint by Caitlin Starlin, which in the UK doesn't come out until like 22nd of July, I think. And so I was going to post it in May because I thought that's when it came out, but that I think is the US date. So if it doesn't come out and I don't get my pre-order in time, it doesn't matter. I'm still posting this video because we're starting now. And it is going to be a bit of a month in my life vlog because my TBR has kind of grown beyond what I first anticipated, but I have a kind of priority TBR, so I'm going to aim to read those ones, and then if I get to read any extras, that's always a bonus. My plan is, as I said, to just read across the month. I have some annual leave at the end of the month, but I also have 2 concerts and a hen do towards the end of the month, and so the plan is hopefully to post it maybe before I go away on the hen do, if not towards the end of July. So let's see how much reading I can do, because if you're aware from my other videos, my reading this month, it's June when I'm filming this, so my reading in June and in May has not been as good as the other months, so we'll see where I go. Anyway, I thought I should start and let you know what my priority TBR is. Obviously, this Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling, if it comes out. I know that it involves some nuns and a coup, and I don't know much more than that, but that is one book that I want to read. The other one is also about nuns, and it's also a sapphic, I believe. It's Mere by Danielle Giles. I saw this and saw it as like sapphic nuns, medieval stuff. It's set in like a what's it called? It has an abbess and religion. And I thought the cover is one of those covers that's kind of like it's not, I can't describe it, my words aren't coming out, like really soft kind of cover. I don't know, and I really think the contrast of like the red and the green is really nice. So I pre-ordered this a little while ago when I saw that it was coming out, because I thought that would be of interest to me, because it combines all my favourite things: sapphic-ness, medievalness, nuns. I also have Once Was Willem by M.R. Carey. I've got the broken binding edition. I don't actually know whether I prefer this one or I prefer the traditional one. Oh, but it does have like a really cool, oh, you can't see that, it does have a really cool naked hardback that has this script on it, but the traditional published one is red, and it kind of fits the red theme for the rest of the books I'm about to show you, and so I don't know which one I prefer, because I think there's even a special edition of the red one in like Waterstones that I saw, but I ended up just picking up the broken binding one. I know very little about this, apart from I think it's kind of meant to be a chosen one story, I guess, that follows this character called Willem. I genuinely don't know much. It's a very short one. I've heard fairly good things about it. It's got some really reviews by people like Christopher Buehlman, who obviously writes medieval fantasy, a masterpiece of medieval dark fiction. It's got R.J. Barker on the back. Yeah, I'm interested in reading this one. I had my eye on it for a while. And then I have 2 non-fictions. Well, sorry, 1 non-fiction, 1 poetry book. The poetry book is called Eleanor Among the Saints by Rachel Mann. For those of you who do not know, Eleanor slash John Reichner, I believe, is someone who is seen as an example of trans representation in the medieval world. The kind of short version is that there's this person named Eleanor Reichner who would go out and was a sex worker and was arrested because they found out that Eleanor was a name that she went by, and that her legal name was John. And so there is a whole kind of movement, I guess, where when we look at historical queer representation, we can obviously acknowledge that this is a level of representation, but we are not in the medieval period, and so we can't put the notions of modern day sexuality and gender onto the medieval era. However, obviously it is a representation, a potentially trans representation, and so I'd seen this and I thought it was really interesting. And I don't read poetry like pretty much at all. I wanted to pick it up because Eleanor Reichner is someone who I wrote about in some of my essays whilst I was studying, and is someone who I knew about even prior to doing my masters, because I was always looking for examples of queer history, even when I was doing my undergraduate. So this is one that I wanted to pick up, and I'm excited to see kind of what is going to come out of it, because again, I don't really read poetry, and I just thought it would be interesting, and it has a nice little medieval picture on the front as well. And then I have my non-fiction, which is Poet, Mystic, Widow, Wife by Hetta House, and this is about medieval women. And my original idea for my dissertation, I suppose I could get into my actual medieval dissertation afterwards, but anyway, my original idea was about women, and I was thinking about powerful women, and specifically looking at like medieval mistresses, because I thought that they were really interesting, and the power that they had over medieval kings that kind of is replicated in other eras of history, but it just seemed so prominent in that medieval period. And I ended up learning quite a bit about women on my course, specifically women who were quite prominent in the religious sense, and anchoresses, which has always been a kind of like specific niche interest that I really liked. I would love to write something set with a medieval anchoress, but I ended up switching and ended up doing my dissertation on medieval perceptions of race instead. And I do have 2 other non-fiction books, but I'll get to that in a minute. I saw that this one was being released at the end of last year. I ended up getting it over Christmas, and I have been waiting to just find a moment to read it, and I thought, you know what, it's a really cool cover. I would really like to read this one as well. It's interesting to read more about medieval women because it's such a different time period, and understanding specifically like the mysticism around women in the medieval period, which I also think is why Mia is going to be really interesting, because I think it might have aspects of this in it in terms of like the religion and the mysticness and these women who have visions. So yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting. I do also have 2 other books. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get them both out, because I don't know where one of them is actually. Let me get one of them though. So one of them is Imaginary Animals by Boria Sachs. This is about just animals and the kind of bestiaries that you had in the medieval period. As I said, I did my dissection on medieval perceptions of race, and part of that was how specifically in literature and in maps, people of colour were often categorised in the same way that these kind of monstrous creatures were, and so it's really interesting to kind of see those comparisons and those imageries spoken about, and how we perhaps got our early modern perceptions of race and these racial stereotypes from things that happened in the medieval period. And also, I'm just a creature girl, so I was really interested to read about these kind of imaginary creatures. My other book is also about medieval creatures. It's specifically in maps, so it's about like sea monsters. It is somewhere at the back of my bookshelf though, but I will insert a picture here. I got that one quite a few years ago, and it's one that I used virtually as a resource during my dissertation. I ended up managing to pick up the actual one. I think I went to maybe like the British Library or something like that a couple of years ago. Maybe it was Waterstones, I don't remember, and picked it up. But I haven't read that one yet, and I would like to read that one too. And then I also have a few books on my Kindle as well. So I have Pilgrim, and I also have The Black Hunger. Both of these I have learned about in the past year. The Black Hunger is a fairly new release, and Pilgrim, I don't know how long that's been out for, but it popped up when I was seeing people talk about medieval recommendations. So I would like to get to those 2 as well. And that's kind of it. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books, potentially 10 if I count the 2 non-fictions. I'm not gonna say that I'm reading both the other non-fictions. Hold on, I miscounted then. 9, sorry. 9 if I read the 2 other non-fictions, but I reckon I'll probably only get to 1 other if I can. I would like to read some more non-fiction because I kind of haven't been keeping up with that much this year. And I'm also kind of open to reading any other medieval books. As I said in I think probably my last video, I read some of Between Two Fires by Christopher Bjornman before, and that is often lauded as like a really big dark medieval fantasy book. So I might see if I can pick that one up. The goal is just to read as much medieval fiction as possible, really. So if you got any recs, let me know, because your girl's back in a medieval era. And this project technically hasn't even started yet. As I said, it's June, but I wanted to film this in advance so that I could just film everything that goes on in July. And so yeah, I'll see you when I've started one of my books. One last thing, this is why I was talking about in my rogues video that I bought this book, that it could be relevant, because it's obviously a kind of medieval book, but I think I am probably going to save it for my mages and wizards and sorcerers video. Undecided yet, we'll see how I feel towards the end of the month. Just a quick message to say, look what has arrived. I got an email to say it was being dispatched the other day, and I was like, seriously? Because I didn't think it was coming out to the 22nd. So it is definitely here, and now I can make a start on this soon. I think it might be the first one that I read for this video. I still have 1 and a 30% of a book to read for the other video I'm filming right now, but my goal is to get them both done by this weekend, because I have like 3 weeks to read the rest of the 8+ books for the medieval video. So, but it's here, yay! Last night I got about 90 pages into The Starving Saints. We start with our main character, whose name I'm absolutely going to butcher. I was meant to look it up before I started filming this, but I always forget to do that. Phocine? To be determined. Who is a nun who is essentially kind of been exiled, but is still a part of, they're all in this castle, they're under siege, but she's kind of been exiled from the priory that she previously worked under. The head prioress dislikes her, but she has been able to solve the problem of getting them clean water, and she's now under the pressure from the king to be able to solve the issue of getting them food. And we also follow another 2 perspectives, one from Servine, who is a lady knight who is kind of in the really high, what's the word I'm looking for? She's high level in terms of she has an audience with the king, but the king is quite protective of her, and so doesn't want her out on the front line the same way that some of the male knights are. And so she is kind of forced to have to look after I would have forgotten. Phocine. That's what we're going with for now. And then we have another perspective, Trailer, I believe. You know what, again, I should have had a look really beforehand. Trailer, yeah, who has a link to, it gives us a bit of insight into things that have happened before what's gone on in this book. She has a link with Servine, and she has ended up in this place not by accident. And the whole setting is that they are currently under siege, they're running out of food, their supplies are really limited, Phocine's under pressure to be able to produce food. There are talks of cannibalism and hinting at that's what they're going to have to turn to, but it is very much the people won't know, because we're not going to tell them, and at this point, like, there is nothing else we can do. They're also saving the most clean water for the people who are like senior, so the king and his kind of court. There is still difference in how they are treated, all confined in this really small space. We have a few instances where things have started to happen that are a little bit strange, and Phocine ends up meeting these 2 little creatures that she has to keep secret. And Trailer's perspective, we see that something strange happens to her below the castle, and where I'm at now, we have just encountered the Saints, who are these people who seem to have brought with them an abundance of food, and kind of delirium. The first kind of moments that we have, everyone is really disbelieving that how this can be. They think that they're perhaps the enemy, but no one lifted the gate to let them in. How did they get in? You know, how are they here? Like, but they look so reminiscent of the saints that they worship in this series, and so there is kind of this hope, I guess, or almost delirious hope, because they've reached a point where things are obviously so difficult that they have to believe that this is real and that these saints are going to save them. And so that's kind of where I left it off last night at 90 pages. We have some really interesting elements where it is a very gothic story. It feels kind of foreboding, because the saints seem to have these powers and this skill to almost create this delirium. For lack of a better word, I think I've said that 3 times now. That's where I'm at so far. I'm hoping to get through some more tonight. It feels to be quite a quick read so far. I'm curious to see about what's going to happen. I think from looking at the blurb, it's clear that these saints aren't exactly what they seem. And from that forward blurb that I showed you earlier, it's clear that things probably are going to get worse before they get better. 150 pages in. The cannibalism is cannibalism. Good morning. I'm just filming this really quickly before I start work, because if I don't do it now, I'm going to forget. So I am 2/3 of the way through The Starving Saints. I am finding it to be quite atmospheric. It's very slow paced, but I'm finding that I'm enjoying the way the cannibalism is written. because I was thinking, I don't think I've read too many books that have cannibalism in them. Tender is the Flesh is an obvious one, but off the top of my head I can't really remember anything else. And I really appreciate it in this one. It's obviously still seen as a horrible act to those who are conscious of what the cannibalism is, but for those who are just so caught up in the religious fervour of the fact that they have saints who have come along and brought them food and are here to save them, they don't know what they're doing, and so it's seen as this religious experience. It's seen as this almost I mean, it's a feast. It's described as a feast. It's a celebration because they're finally able to eat. And so I do like those kind of religious comparisons, because obviously if you think about being Christian and communion and drinking the wine, it being the blood of Christ, there is such religious connections with cannibalism, and so I do like the way that is done. Character wise, I'm finding them a bit flat. We have 3 different viewpoints, and they're picked because they're all different characters going through different things. We have Fason, who is recently been excommunicated from the priory, and who doesn't believe and is the creator of these miracles, and so she is not impacted really by what's going on. We also have Trailer, who also is has already experienced bad things in the past, and so isn't all caught up in this either. And then we have Savoyne, who is caught up in this and is having to kind of fight to not be so drawn in by this religious wonder that's happening. And they all are distinct, but they're not really that distinct. They don't really have major defining personalities. I can tell you that they're different characters, they all have different backstories, they are all different, but that still doesn't really make them feel like they have lots of depth to me. Particularly I was thinking Savoyne, she is coming to in these moments and realising what she's done and just kind of weeping with emotion, and I almost wish that she was doing more. She could go one of 2 ways. She's kind of gone the middle way, where she is really upset by what's happened and trying to solve this problem, where she could have gone one way where she is filled with anger and rage and gone to do something drastic to these saints, or even the opposite way where she's so consumed by grief that brings out a similar outcome as well. But it isn't. It's kind of middle of the road. She is picking herself up and seeing how she can go and help these people, which makes sense, I guess, for a smooth story in a way, to keep the plot going. But I feel that the almost, I guess, the lack of reaction, there is reaction, she's upset, it just doesn't feel like there's enough really for me. We also have Trailer, as I said, who is this kind of devious character who's running around and doing different things, and she isn't really anything more than that. She is just someone she's driven by revenge, but even then the revenge takes a backseat to what's going on, but it still is present there. And then with Fason, she is I was gonna say kind of hopeless, but she's trying. She's the one who kind of is doing her best, and I do like that. There's this thing that just happened recently which shows that she isn't a perfect person. She is fighting back against these saints, but there is a bit of agency there, because she did something where she prioritises herself over someone else, and so I did like that element, because it did show a little bit more oomph to her character. But prior to that point, I was just thinking it's not really enough, and I don't know if it's because it is slow paced and so things are happening really slowly, and so that it's a gradual kind of process, and whether things will change in the final 30% that I have to read. But yeah, it's the characterization at the moment that I'm not loving. It's just that I feel like could pack more of a punch, I guess. But I'm hoping to finish it tonight. I am interested to see how it will end. As I said, I think it's fairly well written. It does feel very gothic and medieval, and obviously the cannibalism, as I said, I think the cannibalism is the highlight. Words you never thought would come out of my mouth. Last night I finished The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starlin. It's gonna be a 3 stars. I stand by what I said about the characterisation. I think Honestly, the final third I read was the worst. The characterization feels like it really stands out there because they are all trying really hard to kind of finalise their freedom and escape these saints, and I just don't think there is enough differentiation between the characters and their voices for it to really feel like they're different people. They just feel a bit flat to me, and so unfortunately that's gonna be a 3. I do think the final third as well is very fever dream, delirium, what exactly is going on, which is fine. I think in some stories it works, and I think it does work in here. Like, it's described in the blurb as Bacchanalian, and I do think that it is definitely Bacchanalian chaos in that final third. But I think that it made it hard exactly to understand what was going on at points, which can leave you feeling a little bit, I don't want to say stupid, but I know that when I'm reading and if it kind of loses me a bit, I feel like I just don't feel like I'm clever enough almost to understand what's going on. But I don't think that's the intention of this one, as opposed to like some other kind of more open-ended stories. This one is a little bit open-ended, and the mysticism of it all, I mean, that's part of it, is the mysticism of being a medieval saint and a medieval miracle worker. It's all part of it. So I do think that the atmosphere, I do think that the historical aspect, although it's very contained in one place, and so it is definitely a medieval story, but it's so contained in one area that medievalism is not really expansive, if that makes sense, because you're not looking at, it's in, I mean, as far as I'm aware, it's in a made up place, and so it's medieval adjacent. Does any of this make sense? I don't know. Either way, it was on my 25 in 2025, so I'm glad to have ticked it off. I think it is a very pretty book, and premise wise it is something that I should have loved, and I didn't love it as much as I was hoping to, which is a little sad. Next on my list, I don't know what I'm going to read. I was thinking about maybe starting the non-fiction. It is the weekend right now, so I've got a little bit of time to get some reading done before I've only got 3.5 days of work next week, so I should be able to get some reading done then, and then after that I'm on annual leave, so the time is creeping closer. It doesn't help that I've kind of I didn't abandon it, but I did decide to do a Summerween video in the midst of this, when I could have been finishing other books. So I don't know what I'm going to pick up next. I'm thinking the non-fiction, and then I might also just have a little bit of a read through the poetry book as well, and at least get those started so that I can read bits of those across the next week. I'm really excited, I think, to pick up One Swords Willem next, because I think that's going to be the most different. Mia, that I was thinking about reading, is also kind of sapphic nuns, so I'm going to leave that one till a little bit later. I think One Swords Willem is not too long, so I think that's my next one that I'm going to pick up. I was just trying to think if there was anything else I was missing. I'm looking at my books thinking, what else did I say I was going to read for this video? I don't remember. I'll cross that bridge when I decide what to read, but right now I need to go lie down because you can probably just see the sweat on my face. It's really warm. Good afternoon. I have read 2 chapters of Poet, Mystic, Widow, Wife. This one is following 4 different women who fit into the category of poet, mystic, widow and wife. 2 of them I already know about, the mystic, who is Julian of Norwich, and the wife, who's Marjorie Kemp. Both of them I did a little bit of work on whilst I was doing my masters in medieval studies. Julian of Norwich specifically was one of those anchoresses that I was really interested in. But they are looking at those 4 women in particular, but also different themes that women face throughout their lives. So the first chapter looks at motherhood, and then it also looks at marriage, and the next chapter I think is going to look at those women who didn't want to be married, and so it pulls from other examples of women in the medieval period who face different kind of trials and tribulations, and what it is they encounter, but with a specific focus on those 4 women framing the story. So far I'm really liking it. I think it's a really accessible way to get into medieval history, specifically medieval history about women. That's definitely a bonus, because I feel like so many of the texts are kind of locked up behind these academic barriers, like you need a JSTOR subscription sometimes to access, or a university library access to be able to get your hands on some of the books in these areas because they cost so much, but this is a really short, really, and also accessible way to get in to medieval women if you're interested. I do have a few other non-fictions that I have read previously that I'll put here that I have liked and that I do recommend if you're interested in learning more specifically about circumstances. Fires of Lust in particular was a 5-star for me, a really informative look at sex and similar things in here, you know, marriage and prostitution and everything in the Middle Ages. So I recommend that one definitely if you're interested. I'm going to try and make some more headway on this. I'll pick up something else as well. Hopefully, I'm hoping to at least finish this in the next few days because as I said, I got through 2 chapters and they're relatively short chapters, to be honest. And then overall we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's only 7 more chapters and a conclusion after what I've already read. So I think I could definitely get this through this by the weekend. I'm kind of taking my time with it because non-fiction, I need to read in small doses. So another few chapters tonight, start something else as well. So I've got more than one thing on the go. That's the plan. Hello, I have read through the collection Eleanor Among the Saints. I thought I would talk to you a little bit about it. So the author Rachel Mann is trans, and so watching a few of the interviews retrospectively, I feel like I should have watched them maybe going into the collection, because it just talks about what it is that Rachel aims to do with this collection in terms of the celebration of being trans and Eleanor, and imagining Eleanor not just in the medieval period but as a modern day trans woman and kind of transcending through time in that sense. I thought it was a really well written collection. I think it is quite medieval. Looking into Rachel Mann's background, if you don't have medieval knowledge, there are going to be some things that kind of go over your head. There's a section which talks about the Mappa Mundi, which is something that I looked at for my dissertation, and it talks about all the creatures on the Mappa Mundi where I looked at, like the Blemmy, which I'll insert a picture of. But unless you specifically have looked at and researched medieval stuff, I think that's definitely going to go over your head. So this is, I think, a very niche collection. I think I'm someone who definitely fits the niche. I just think that I need I almost feel like I need to study poetry. It's similar to like Shakespeare. I enjoy Shakespeare so much more when I'm discussing it and doing it with people. It's the one thing that I really enjoyed about doing English Lit A-level and a few modules at degree level, because I can read it and I can get something out of it, but having the discussion with other people and seeing their interpretation and maybe why a word choice was used helps me better understand what it is I'm reading. All of this is to say that I stress out when I read poetry because I'm like, what if I don't understand what the aim of the poem is? I think that if you're interested in reading more trans poetry, if you're interested in the medieval period, if you're interested in, it's not just about Eleanor, it's also about Rachel Mann. It's about experiences with death and identity. It touches a little bit on the modern day situation in the UK. This is published in 2024, so obviously even then things have changed in the past year with the UK government and how things have deteriorated, and so it's very contemporary in that sense, that it talks a lot about a lot of just contemporary issues. I think there is like a vague reference to Brianna Joy, but it's not explicitly said. I'm glad that I gave it a chance. I'm not going to rate it because I don't think it's fair. I think I want to reread it. I think I want to sit down and I want to properly go through and try and and unpick things in it, because I think I will get even more of a good experience out of it having done that. But I would recommend it, but more so if you're a poetry person, not if you're looking to just pick up random medieval things, because I think that probably wouldn't work for you. But I'm glad to have picked it up anyway, because I don't really read poetry at all, and so it's nice to do that. I said I was going to start Once Was Willem. I have not. I instead started The Black Hunger because I was like, I'm going to see Stray Kids tomorrow. I'm going to be on a train. I don't really want to start a physical book and take it with me. If I take my Kindle, there's less stuff to pack. I'm only taking a backpack and, a crossbody. Just for ease, I'll start a Kindle book so that I can get into the flow of it, so that it's a lot easier for me to get into it on the train. I'm DNFing it, so that didn't work out. Where to start? So just in terms of the book itself, the book itself follows this character named John who goes on this pilgrimage essentially and encounters some supernatural beings. That's the kind of plot blurb description. The problem is that you don't see very much of that at all. You are hooked in with the opening line, which basically is something along the lines of, I'm going to die soon, so I need to write everything down. And then the next 50 pages, which is as far as I got, was him recounting his entire life story up until the point, essentially, that I assume he will be where he is, where he's going to die. I didn't get that far for numerous reasons. The first being the writing itself. We have that hook, and then we essentially go into, my name is John and I was born here and this is my family and this is how I grew up. And then it follows him through his schooling because he goes off to Oxford, and then, you know, the things he was researching at Oxford. And I get that because of the structure of the story, if it's setting up him as a character, like, I'm not against this way of storytelling. I just don't think that there is enough interesting things going on about the characters or the plot to make me sit through however long that this section of the book is, because there is like next to nothing, only that very opening bit, and then that's the only hint you've got that something untoward is going to happen in the future. The other part, as I said, the characters. We have this character John. He is a lord, the son of a lord, and so he's upper class. His best friend is a man named Garrett, who's the son of a blacksmith in town, and they grew up as friends together, despite the class difference between them. And then they also grew up as lovers, and the whole point is that they're secretly being together a lot of this time, and they manage to avoid being caught essentially. And so there is that element where there's a class difference between them. Garrett ends up following him to Oxford and further into his travels at the bit I'm at now, and they kind of just say, oh, he's my servant, and so it means that they can, you know, live together and still sneak around together. But we do have, like, you know, how they first had their first kiss and them like spending time together when they were young, but the amount of detail in their relationship is very little because the way the story is, because it's just telling so much in 50 pages where already he's in his like mid-20s, and it talks a lot about his schooling. It's the setup of his like schooling interests as opposed to his relationship. And so we have Garrett just here, and I'm just like, I know nothing about this man apart from his name's Garrett, he's big, he's ginger, that's it. I can't tell you anything else. And so that doesn't really incentivize me about their relationship. And then we have the fact that the plot centers around him traveling to India, and later, I think, because there's a map in the front of the book looking at like Mongolia and Tibet and stuff like that, where there is this Buddhist group, and that is what it kind of revolves around. That's as much as I can give you because that's as much as I've got from what I've read. It doesn't really expand on that much in the blurb, and the rest that I have gotten is through reviews, so I don't feel like I have a good enough grasp on what exactly the book entails because I've not read it and because I'm only reading it secondhand. But the character John, because he's upper class, because he's white, and because the author's white, he's studying Oriental studies. It's set in the 1800s. He's writing in 1912. That's the kind of date that's on that chapter, but he's born in the 1800s, and so you obviously think there is going to be some level of, you know, racism and opinions. They are in the British Empire, still the height of the British Empire, and so it's very clear that John knows his peers have those opinions and he is trying not to have those opinions, but it's very awkward in the way it's written, where he meets this character who's called Sid Kong, Sid for short because I'm sure you can't pronounce it, and Sid is from India, and they start talking, and John's trying not to make presumptions about Sid and his life, but he's still doing it in this awkward way that is meant to be kind of well-intentioned, and it just feels really awkward to read. Like, it just makes, like, John is a wet character. He's flat and he's wet. There is nothing interesting about him. He's just this guy. And so, yeah, I'm 5 minutes in. This was not meant to be a 5-minute rant review, but that's as far as I got, and I just think the writing style is not it's not interesting me at all. There is a review on Goodreads that goes into a lot further detail around the Buddhist element and about what happens in the book and the plot that I did read, and I think that that's probably worth reading if you want to read the book, just to give you a bit more context about someone who is Buddhist. But yeah, it's going to be a DNF for me, unfortunately. So in the meantime, I have read some more of Poet Mystic Widow Wife, and we have a couple of chapters. So I think the one I last mentioned was about women who weren't married, and it was essentially women who were, you know, just in relationships, or having sex basically, outside of marriage, and the kind of perceptions around women who did that, and the church and things like that. We then have a chapter on travel, which is kind of filled with stuff that I am more aware of. We look at Mandeville's Travels, which is a text that I used in my dissertation, and also mentions like the Mappa Mundis that I mentioned that are in Eleanor Among the Saints, and the kind of creatures that are in these maps and how women travelled. Marjorie Kemp features so heavily in this. She's one of the 4 women anyway, but I think because so much is written about her life, and because she wrote so much, she is such a kind of key source, and so it does feel a little all about Marjorie, and you think so many people in her contemporaries found her so insufferable, and she just sounded it at times, but we have so much information about her, so we would be so lost otherwise to know so much about everything that she went through. So you kind of got to just take what you can get. And I'll show you a picture actually, a bit further of like what I looked at in my dissertation, because there's some pictures in here, but also the kind of blemmies that I was mentioning in the last clip. So this one here is the blemmy, and then we have, it's called the skypod, which is the one in the middle, that has the foot, and then the one on the other side I think is just a cyclops, but these are monstrous creatures, and I use quotes because that's a whole debate as well, who are featured on maps that people believe to exist, and they believe them to exist oftentimes in Asia and Africa, because these are places that weren't as explored by British colonisers, and so they had just these ideas of the people that existed there, which meant that when they did go there, they had these stereotypes that they attached with these monstrous people onto people who did not fit the Christian, white, Eurocentrist, patriarchal norm. And so anyone who was non-normative kind of had a link in comparison there. So that's what my dissertation was about. It was looking at how essentially Monstrous Peoples was a kind of an allegory for race. And so it's nice to see kind of what I know is kind of reflecting here a little bit. And this doesn't really mention race at all. It does mention it a little bit because obviously with travel you can't not talk about trade, because there is such a kind of misconception that the medieval period is just the Dark Ages, which I refute the Dark Ages. So there is so much that went on, and I think books like this do good to highlight the fact that everyday life was not maybe what you perceive. The Middle Ages was a 1,000-year period, like medieval period covers 1,000 years. So you can't generalise it all as the Dark Ages or a dark period, because there's just so many things that happen in that point in time. It's just that after that, Industrial Revolution happened so quickly and industrialisation happened so quickly that it feels different in comparison. Anyway, I'll get off my high horse. After that, we had a chapter on work and about what women have done for work in the medieval period. There was a really interesting bit about beer brewing and ale brewing, because it's something that women can do from home and they could kind of do on their own schedule, because a lot of them were at home looking after children. It made sense that they were people who brewed ale, because they could have so much focus on it. And then after the Black Death, it became more of a male profession and more men started to pick it up and got interested in it. And then I've also just read the chapter on female friendship as well, so specifically looking at contemporaries who talk about other women, specifically the lady mentioned, Christine de Pizan, who was a court writer and a widow, and also Marie de France, who are the other 2 women who are referenced here, the poet and the widow, talking about in their writings how they highlighted women and women's friendship, and how a lot of the texts that we have from the medieval period, like Geoffrey Chaucer and everything like that, don't feature a lot of women, or they feature women who are kind of filled with stereotypes and the kind of idea that women were just people who couldn't do more than think about stuff like sex, or like, you know, that there was no real substance to them. So it's really nice to kind of see evidence of female friendship, especially between people like Marjorie and Julian. Marjorie Kemp went to Julian of Norwich's anchoress window for advice, and I don't think I actually knew that. I don't think I knew that they met, and so that's really kind of a nice kind of meeting point of those two kind of iconic medieval women are now featuring together in this book, and who I had knowledge about, and it kind of just puts it a little bit more into perspective. I think I have about 3 or 4 chapters left, 3 chapters, one called Influencing People, Having It All, and Death, and then there's also a conclusion as well. So I reckon I could probably get it finished over this weekend. As I said, I'm going to a concert tomorrow, so it'll probably maybe be Saturday when I get back. It depends on how much I read tonight. And then I'll finish my first non-fiction. I don't know what I'm going to read now, because my plan wasn't to bring my Kindle, wasn't to bring a physical book with me to go see Stray Kids. But part of me is now like, might as well bring Once Was Willem, which funnily enough is mentioned at the back of the Black Hunger with a little preview of it. So I might bring it, I don't know. And then I also have my other non-fiction books now, because I was like, well, you know, they're not a priority. I've got all these fiction books that are a priority, but if I'm doing F1, maybe I will pick another one up. We'll see. Whatever I'm in the mood for when I'm packing, I guess. Hello. This is just going to be a random bunch of words. I'm back from Stray Kids. I took some small clips. I'll insert them in this bit here. Rock and roll, we dance until we fall. Don't stop it, here we go. Don't stop it, here we go. Here we go. Yesterday was an experience. If you're my friend or my sister or my parents, you can skip over this bit, because I'm about to go into Kim details her train experiences again. My train was cancelled, and then they put on a replacement one, which was going to go from the stop before me all the way through to London. Only it came through our station and didn't stop, and the announcer was like, yeah, no one told them that they needed to stop here. So I had to go and just go and grab another train. So I ended up I only got in half an hour later than I was originally meant to get in, but that was not the most peaceful start to my day. And it was scorching hot yesterday, and the concert was really good, and I did actually read on the train, which is the point of this. I wasn't going to, because I was like, I'm exhausted, but I started Once Was Willem. It's currently downstairs in my backpack, and everything else in my backpack got really wet because it was really bad raining today, and I haven't checked the book yet. And once I finish this, I'm literally I'm ordering Chinese and I'm getting in my pajamas, so I'm not getting the book right now, because I cannot face looking at it if it is damaged, because it is a broken binding book, and I just don't want to think about it. So here we go, we can insert here. So Once Was Willem, I understand now a little bit. I mean, they probably just put it because it's a similar book anyway, but why it was in the back of the Black Hunger is because it is very much a similar premise, in that you have a character who is recounting their life. We start with this voice who is explaining this history of this place where he kind of lived, and it explains something that happens basically when he is younger, and that doesn't really involve him, or well, even before he's born, and so we go through that kind of short episodic moments, and then we learn about Willem, who we learn actually died when he was young and was resurrected. And so Willem is talking as though he is Willem, and that is why he's called Once Was Willem, because he is Willem, but he's also not Willem, because he did not come back the same. And his resurrection has happened, and he's now kind of just decided to go and venture out across the world, or wherever he's going, and that's where I've gotten up to, because I've got 86 pages in. Writing wise, I think it's a lot easier to read than the Black Hunger, just because it's got fairly short chapters, and there is just a lot more world building, like the story that they tell you at the beginning that explains how exactly kind of circumstances came to be about the area that they live. Feels like it doesn't make sense, but it does, because it sets up the premise that this area is cursed, and it explains kind of like the reactions of the people and what they did, and what exactly made this curse, and it doesn't take away too much from the story, in the same way that with the Black Hunger we completely are detached from the I'm going to die soon, because we go straight into this whole period where we're just talking about schooling and everything else. It actually feels a bit more relevant to kind of what is being discussed, and so I'm hoping to finish it this weekend, because It's under 300 pages, so I reckon, I don't know if I'm doing any reading tonight. I'm tired, but if I do, I'll read a little bit and then hopefully finish it tomorrow. As I said, it was soaking wet today, so I'm completely drenched through, and I've come back and my parents are on holiday, so it's just me. So I'm gonna do some housework. That's my plan, actually. I'm gonna change my bed sheets. I've already put one wash on. I'm gonna put another wash on, and then I'm gonna eat, and then I'm gonna laze about and do nothing, because I did a lot of steps yesterday and I'm tired. I'm gonna cut half of this out, probably. Do I have any other updates? I also had another training experience today. I really think we need a running counter, because at this point I think it's 4 training experiences in the past month, and I'm going on train on Monday again, back to London, because I'm seeing Becky on Tuesday. So if there is another bad train experience, my head might just explode. I'll let you know how it goes. Just an update, by some miracle, one of the only things that did not get wet, she is in good condition, as far as I can tell anyway. There might be a little bit, no, I think it's all good. How? I don't know. Genuinely, everything else is wet. Receipts, clothes. The only other thing that wasn't wet was my toiletry bag, which was in the middle of all my clothes. So the clothes at the bottom and the clothes at the top got wet because it seeped in through my bag. Everything else, fine. So at least my book's not damaged, I guess. Hello. I'm making dinner. I thought I would bring you to this new view, me in the kitchen. The weather outside is absolutely horrendous. It was thundering earlier, also just like torrential rain. So fun times. I bring you a book update in that I have finished Poet, Mystic, Widow, Wife by Hesse House. I think it's going to be 4 stars. It was, I think, like I said, a really nice, accessible way to learn more about the medieval period, specifically medieval women. And it's fairly short. The actual content of the book, when you take away the references and stuff at the back and what's been used to back up the book, is only 260 pages. And so we have different chapters that discuss different parts of what it means to be a woman in the medieval period. So I've discussed all the other ones, but the other ones that I haven't yet discussed include influencing people, where the author talks about how quite a few of these women were writers, and so they had different experiences with their work being published at the time, and kind of what influence they did have on people. Marjorie Kemp obviously was known pretty much everywhere, and so it was really kind of, I'm making pizza, by the way, just so you know what's going on. Marjorie Kemp was so well known that her story was kind of, it followed her around, and so there were people who encountered her who knew about her and were kind of wary of her and her proclivities, shall we say. Oh my god, this is not coming out at all. Probably shouldn't be doing this with a white top on. We also have Christine de Pizan, who ended up being the biographer for one of the kings. So it talks about really the high level of influence that these women could actually reach. And it's just something that maybe you don't necessarily think about when you think about women in that period, especially when there was a limit on what they could do. And the next chapter is called Having It All, and it kind of touches on that, where some of these women, like Marjorie Kemp, were trying to have it all. They were trying to be more than just mothers and wives, essentially. They were trying to go out and they were trying to do things for themselves, and that didn't necessarily always work for them. Quite often they faced backlash, and that may be because they weren't believed to be supporting their spouses, or they weren't prioritising their children, and so it kind of talks about the fact that there's only a few cases where really you could have it all, in the sense that Julian of Norwich, for example, was an anchoress, and so she dedicated her life post 30s to being locked away inside this cell, and she had written things before, and she had people who, you know, were coming to her for advice and guidance, and there wasn't any kind of question, I guess, about her in that way. She was seen in her commitment to God. but there isn't really anything more than that. There, like, you have to lock yourself away from the world basically and be an anchoress or be a nun to be able to be free from the conceptions of what a woman should be in the medieval period, especially specifically in medieval Britain, I should say, because this focuses on medieval Britain. It obviously doesn't touch on the wider medieval world and the medieval canon, because that could obviously bring women from across the globe, which I think would be really interesting to read about. I think that's something that I'm definitely more keen on doing. The problem a lot of the time with the medieval period is that it's so strongly associated with Europe and Britain that it can be harder to find other medieval areas, because you need to kind of look, I mean, you need to look more deep into it. And in my degree, that was definitely something that we looked at. We looked at travel writings from people from across the globe, specifically in these countries and stuff like that. But ultimately, the British are such a big source in the medieval period that it kind of takes over. So that's one thing which I think, I don't want to say it's missing in this book, because I understand that maybe is not what the intention was set out on. It's set out on these 4 women who happen to be white British Christian women, or French in one case. But yeah, that's just something. And then the final chapter looks at death, and it talks about illness, it talks about sickness, it talks about how quite a few of these women had religious visions that came to them when they were quite close to death, in terms of being ill, and also during childbirth as well. And it also talks quite interestingly about love sickness, and about how love sickness was believed to be a real truth, because it kind of had the idea that the humours were out. For those who are not for those who are not caught up on their medieval science, the idea that you had 4 humours that made up your body and they all needed to be aligned, and if you were ill or if you were acting funny, it could be that one of your humours was off, and so that they'd leach the blood to try and fix it or whatever. And so that was something that I found quite interesting as well. And then it also just talks about legacy as well, because obviously all of the women pass away, and it's not exactly known when they do die, because ultimately no one knew the legacy that they would have to this day. There's no way that, even with the amount of information that we did have about them, they could have ever have predicted that this would be a book that was written about them, and people would be interested in knowing what their future was like. And then it touches in the conclusion on the kind of themes of the book and the different chapters and how they kind of relate to women in present day, which obviously touches on the injustice across the world, again more through a US Western centric lens, because that is the author's background, and so it's just kind of what she's speaking to. I do recommend it. I think if you are interested, I'm glad to have read it, because it feels like it fills that void of the medievalness that I'm missing, and I think it'll be really interesting going into reading Mir, because it specifically looks at sapphic nuns, and there's just, I kind of feel refreshed in my wider context of the medieval religious sphere going into that. So my plan today is to try and finish Once Was Willem, because I don't really want to take 2 physical books with me to London tomorrow, and I'd rather just take the one, because as well it's meant to rain again, and so I've already made it out of this once with one book that's not got water damage. I'm not trying to risk it by putting that book back in my bag. So I'm gonna eat dinner, I'm gonna finish Once Was Willem. I need to finish packing, I haven't done that. I've put my pyjamas in, I've put my pants and socks in, that's it. I haven't done anything else. And yeah, that's the plan. I was trying to make dinner. I've literally just put the tomato onto the pizza base. That's all I've done. Too busy talking. So I'm gonna go do that now. Bye. Reading Once Was Willem, the chapters are really short. They jump around from place to place quite a bit, and so we have a lot of things that are going on in the world, except we still don't really have our main story yet. We have kind of everything around it. It is actually kind of reminding me of the West Passage in the way that it's told. The titles of the chapters are kind of all related things, where it's like, of so-and-so and why they didn't last or whatever. And so it is kind of related to what goes on in that chapter. So it's very similar in that sense to the West Passage. The actual plot there at the moment, it's like nothing really has happened. And so while I think it's well written, and I think the short chapters keep you reading, because you're like, okay, well, what's coming next? The plot still hasn't happened yet, and I'm currently 112 pages in, and like we know that there's this sorcerer, and we know that the sorcerer is trying to do things, and things are not quite working out the way he wants, and we know essentially at one point that's going to be the standoff, but like we are nowhere near yet figuring that out, and this book is under 300 pages. It's about 280 something pages, and I'm nearly halfway through, and there still isn't a plot. There is a plot, it's not a plot. I don't know how I'm feeling about it so far. And I think it's going to be a fairly quick read. I'm finishing it tonight. I'm in my PJs, I'm knuckling down, I'm finishing this, and I need to finish packing my suitcase. But yeah, I'll update you when I've finished it. In what little light we have left of the day, I finished it. I did it. I'm gonna give it a 3.5. I think this was interesting because I think that it is very, very similar to the West Passage, and I really like the West Passage. Both of them follow characters who are recounting their lives. They're going on these quests, they're following other characters at the same time, and so we are having a whole mash of different storylines. But it just worked better for me in this one than it did this one. They are also both about life and beings beyond human imagination in different ways. This one more fantastical and this one more Christian inspired. I do think the writing was good. The writing was interesting enough to keep you reading, but I do think that for me, and I like a quest book, I don't mind a slower book, but this felt very slow, I think, because we are following the so many different storylines that all weave together and they all come together at the end of the book. But it does take it's only the last 80 so pages where everything starts to come together, and so you're spending nearly 200 pages building and building and building and building in these tiny little bits that are kind of all over the place, that you know things are going to come back together. I don't in any way think this was bad. It just wasn't quite up to the same as the West Passage for it, but it's what I would compare it to the most. I would also compare it to Gods of the Weirdwood by R.J. Barker, very much for the village coming together to defend their land from people who are trying to take it from them or trying to do wrong by them. I really felt that strongly in the last half of this book, and that was another 5-star for me. So it is interesting to kind of really think and see the comparisons between all the three of the books, because I don't know about anyone else, but I find it really hard sometimes to think about recommendations for books. But I was reading this and I was like, wow, the West Passage, Gods of the Weirdwood, I can really see the parallels and the likeness between them, to say if you like this then you should also read this, which I don't often feel like I do. I don't often feel like I can think of recommendations in that way. Yeah, that's the end. It's it's 9:30. I still haven't packed my case, so that's what I'm going to be doing right now. I will be taking Mia with me tomorrow on the train to London, so I'll check in with you when I'm there. Maybe I've read a page or two, we'll see, because I've read a lot today. I've read the whole rest of Once Was Willem and the rest of also Poet, Mystic, Widow, Wife. I think that was the order. Yeah, bye. Apologies for the not so great angle, but I'm in my hotel room in London. I'll turn my fan off, I'm making too much noise. So I thought I'd do a quick update on Mia before I head out for the afternoon to explore. I'm going to do a bit of shopping, I think. I still don't know what I'm wearing tomorrow. I do buy clothes, I bring clothes with me. I don't know what I want to wear, so I'm going to have a little browse and see if I can maybe find something. And then I'm also going to the Globe Theatre tonight because they're doing a Pride tour, so I've booked onto that. Anyway, the book. I'm 116 pages in, 9 chapters, and we have our main character Hilda, who is the infirmary nun. We kind of follow her. There are some kind of mysterious things that are set up. She doesn't have the best relationship with the abbess and some of the other nuns, and eventually you start to figure out why that is. So in a way, parallels to the Starving Saints immediately, just very different reasons that they are being a little bit ostracized by the people around them. And in the very opening, we see this child who has gone missing in the Mere, which is essentially like this swampy marshland that surrounds the abbey where they live. And the abbess returns. It was on the journey from the abbess returning to the abbey, where this child went missing, and she had brought with her a whole host of other people, including a seer named Wolfran, which means wolf if you didn't know. And so we have this seer character who's really determined to find this boy, and Hilda, who is kind of being everyone else no one else wants to find him, and not in the sense that they don't want to find the boy, but they don't want to go into the mere because there is something's happening there. No one will explicitly say why. We also have another character named Sweet, who Hilda seems to be quite close with. You can kind of figure as things go on. I mean, I don't think at this point it's explicitly said, but I have a pretty strong idea of why they have the relationship that they do. And yeah, Hilda's kind of just following the people around her who she trusts, that, you know, they say we don't go in the mere, so we don't go in the mere, and won't help Wolfran. But then she kind of starts to help her. And eventually this boy has returned, and strange things have kind of happened, and there is said to be a curse brought upon the abbey, which is already struggling as well. And again, parallels to the Starving Saints. It is different in the sense that it is very much a British story. The other one kind of felt tinged with, it was a lot more fantastical. It did feel kind of medieval England, but also strongly probably more medieval France as well, whereas this one is set in Norfolk, and so the kind of empty country marshland feels very strong here. I am interested to see where it goes. So far it's kind of slow paced. The boy returning kind of happened at the moment where I was starting to think, what's happening next? The characters as well, we haven't really got too much into them yet. We are following Hilda, but aside from her, we don't really still don't know. We know bits about Wolfran, but not enough between the two of them. They haven't spent a lot of time together. So I will be interested to see where things go. So it's about 360 pages, I think. Tonight I'm going to see if I feel like reading a bit more. Tomorrow I doubt I'll get to read, and then I'm obviously back home on Wednesday, so I'm hoping maybe I can finish it in the next couple of days, because then I'm off on the hen do. So just busy, just really busy. In terms of Pilgrim, I did start it a little bit when I was on the train back from London the other day. I'm gonna try it a little bit more, but at the moment it's not really appealing to me, so I don't know if I'm going to read it for this video. So after I finish this, I'm going to try a little bit more of that, and then I'm thinking I might pick up one of my non-fictions and see if I can get through that too, because I have had them for a little while, so it'd be nice to kind of tick them off / read more non-fiction, because that is always a goal. But at this point I don't know. Anyway, I'm off to freshen up and then head out, so bye. You're balanced precariously on a can right now. I wasn't planning to check in again tonight, however I did a little bit of shopping. I got a little top to go over my top, so outfit success. I also went on a pride tour of the Globe Theatre, and unintentionally it was really relevant to this video. So the lovely tour guide Vincent, they went through and talked about not just Elizabethan England, but also pre-Elizabethan times, talked about medieval times, talked about the Greeks and the Romans as well, and even like the Celtic gay marriages, which I didn't know was a thing, so I'm going to be doing some research into that. But funnily enough, they were mentioning about the fact that a lot of the medieval period, there were a lot of gay people in monasteries and in nunneries, or what's the word for it? Abbeys? Nunneries? I don't remember. And I just thought it was interesting because obviously there's 2 books in this video with medieval queer nuns, sapphic nuns specifically, and so it was a nice kind of little touch on things that are relevant to me right now, and some of the information I knew, just talking about the general kind of queer idea of performance in the Elizabethan period in particular, talking about how obviously women were not on stage, and so it focused on the fact that young boys were playing female roles and how that led to things going on there. But some of it was new to me. Specific women that he mentioned that were queer in their identity, not necessarily gay, but people who cross-dressed in the terms that they dressed outside of their station, aka a woman dressed as a man, but also they gave the example of a peasant essentially dressing as a lord that also counted, and so I found that quite interesting. So I thought I'd let you know that. Got myself a drink. Going to maybe watch some TV, depends what's on. Information has been released for tomorrow. I've been patiently waiting. So I've also found out that where I'm staying, there's actually some clothes stuff like right next door. So my plan tomorrow is to go get some breakfast, have a little explore and a little wander, and come back, freshen up, and then go to the concert. And then yeah, so I'll update you. I don't know whether it'll be tomorrow, maybe tomorrow night when I'm back from the concert, because I'm literally in walking distance from the venue. And then I'm just talking about the concert. I don't know. See you then. It is done. I have finished Mia. I did a little bit of wandering this morning, but I ended up coming back to the hotel and just managed to finish the book, so success. 2 days and I got through it. I don't know why I'm writing this. I haven't decided. It is a very slow book, and it is a horror book, but horror in, it's hard to describe. It's like, it's not really obvious horror, and so it's a very slow creeping folk horror book, but at the same time it doesn't really feel like horror at all. I think the kind of fault for me is that the horror comes in such short bursts. There is, again, major similarities to the Starving Saints in that we have people who are starving and people who are dying, and kind of cruelness from within the abbey that they are in, and then every so often there is a death, and there is this kind of foreboding feeling about what lays out in the mirror, but it isn't really explained until towards the end, and even then it's not even really explained properly. I feel like it's probably going to be a 3, but I'm going to think on it a little bit. I think I do want to shout out the end pages, which are really nice, and kind of actually hinting towards something that goes on now that I'm looking at it. It's the same on the back cover as well. Yeah, I don't really know what else I have to say. I don't want to say disappointed. I kind of had like subtle high hopes for this, because I was like, medieval sapphic nuns once again. I think the same for the Starving Saints, where I was hoping for more, I think, from both of them. Unfortunately that wasn't the case, but I read it, and I think this month has proved that I've finally got back out of my reading slump, because I think I have read 12 books so far this month. We're on the 22nd, and so I still have a few days left to read some more books, because I think I only read 5 last month. So yeah, reading slump, it's over. I know this video is over an hour already, because I've edited everything up to before I went on this trip, and it's 57 minutes. So I'm trying to decide whether I actually do want to read one of my non-fictions, or whether I just end it here. Hello, I'm home. I'm exhausted. The concert was very good. A very full circle moment for me, because my first K-pop group was EXO, and so it was just a full circle moment. I did read a little bit of Pilgrim on the train back, but honestly I was too tired. Like, physically I'm exhausted, and there was no stopping. My next day of rest, apart from this afternoon, is Monday. So, and then I'm back at work, so I feel a little bit out of it, and so I do start Pilgrim. I'm just not really feeling it, so I'm gonna put a soft DNF on that one as well. When I filmed that last clip, you'll see it cut off quite dramatically. I had ended the video there, because I was like, oh, I don't know what else I'm gonna read. I thought I'll put an ending in just in case I do decide to end it here, but I have decided that I'm going to read one more book. I'm going to read Sea Monsters on Medieval and Renaissance Maps by Chet van Duzer. This is one that I mentioned I used in my dissertation, because my dissertation looked at the monstrous creatures who were on the maps. This one looks more at monsters, as in, like, you know, kelpies and sea beasts and stuff like that, but it is still relevant because it looks at like the Mappamundis that I used in my dissertation that were in the medieval period. I picked this one because it's a lot easier to get through. It's fairly picture heavy, and not, I mean, it's text heavy, but not, it's mostly picture heavy because it's about art, and so I think I'll probably be able to finish it over the next 2 days. I have some time this afternoon, and then I have some time tomorrow afternoon, and then I'm away on the hen. So goal is I'm getting this video out on Monday. Everything is edited up until this point. I've been very on top of that. So I'm hoping that I will be able to finish this and then get this out next week. And yeah, then that will bring me to an end of this video. It was maybe not as successful as I maybe hyped it up to be in my head. I was really holding my hopes out that I would be so obsessed with every single book that I read in this video, but that was not the case, unfortunately. But I'll live. And as I said, I think it's gotten me out of my reading slump, and it's got me back into being excited about what I'm going to read next. I've already planned out my 2 videos for next month, which is very exciting. And I think I'm at the stage now where I'm like, I want to start reading for those videos. So I feel like it feels like a nice end to finish on something that I've had for a while, but also that I did use as a source. I just didn't have it physically. And yeah, I get to look at all the weird little creatures that are in medieval maps and stuff. You can see just weird creatures. Look at that. Look at that walrus. It's crazy. Anyway, I'm gonna go and read. Well, first of all, I'm actually gonna play Stardew Valley, and I'm also really hungry, but it's only 4:15, so I feel like it's too early to have a dinner. So I'm going to relax, and then I'll read, and then I mean, you'll find out what happens, because there'll be another clip. Not that I suppose anyone cares that much, but in case you were interested, this is the map that I looked at in my dissertation. So if you look really closely, like around these edges, oh, that wasn't really in focus, like here, you can see all, look, there's the Blimmy, the monstrous peoples. And so you have, to kind of give you the brief bit, you have like Jerusalem in the centre, and then Europe is kind of like in the top, and then Asia and Africa at the bottom, because they didn't know where things were, obviously. And then around the outskirts you have some more, so you can see, oh, where's it gone? I just had it like there, and all around the edges. Yeah, they've put all the little monstrous peoples on the outside. Yeah, I did about this for my dissertation. So hello once again, Hereford Mapper Monday. I will say so far that this one is definitely a less accessible book. It definitely is for people who have an interest in this topic already, whereas the Poet Mystic Widowed Wife book, I think, I mean, obviously you need to have an interest in medieval things to pick it up anyway, but as I said, I think it's pretty accessible. It's definitely an accessible non-fiction, whereas this feels slightly more academic non-fiction, if that makes sense. The kind of difference that, like, as I said, I quoted this for my dissertation, and it's not to say that you couldn't quote the other one for your dissertation, but this one is a lot more analysis of all these different maps so far and what exactly you can find in them and kind of what the differences are between them. So if this video has made you decide to pick up these books, just bear that in mind. It's like 3 hours later. I've finished the book, which works out for me because it means I can finish editing and maybe even get this video up tomorrow, unintentionally. Success, win. I'm going to give this 3 stars. It is very academic, like I said, so be aware if you are thinking about picking something like this up. I also think I thought it would be slightly more about the reasons why people put sea monsters on maps, and there is a little bit of that. It talks obviously about the fact that, you know, people put them there because they didn't know what was there, and they'd heard rumours and stories, and some people didn't include them because they didn't think those were true, and they only put, like, you know, the real monsters like octopuses or whales or whatever. But there is a lot of, this is a map, and on this map we find this, this and this, and then we move on to the next kind of image. So that makes it a little bit dense in that sense, and I was kind of like, but I did it, I read it, it was a useful tool in my dissertation, and that was literally 4 years ago, so that doesn't matter anymore. And with that, I am done with this video. I hope that maybe some of these books maybe seem interesting to you, and maybe you'll pick some up. I will forever be on the hunt for more medieval inspired books. Thanks for coming along into my little niche video about my interests, and I'll see you in my next video.